The topic that we're going to kind of go into that'll lead to a future topic is going to be surrounding the feeder strategy, because a lot of people are asking questions about, when to use it, how to use it, and to put some context to that, it's essentially a good way to break past a scaling wall, right? So a lot of people try to implement it right away. The key is not implement it right away, hit that wall first, and then implement it, because the feeder is a way to get around the issue of, your warm traffic just cycling back again and again and again. But we have a better topic, or a better thing to do beyond the feeder if you can. So a feeder is just kind of like a patch on the situation.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I've actually been kind of removing feeder strategy more and more in replacement for import from clicks. Most of the clients that I work with kind of follow my lead, where it's like, hey, I'm going to need this next step in order for us to be very efficient. Otherwise, things just kind of don't make sense, like kind of in platform, and don't make sense necessarily overall. One thing that actually the last account, and I'll kind of do a bit of a deep dive, because I think this is also where it was a feeder strategy transition. And this one is on a client called American Tall. And we ran basically since, January, when I kind of joined them. This is, you'll see a whole bunch of, conversion value over here that was all repeated and that kind of stuff. And we had a lot of Performance Max running. A majority of this company, if we just look at basically the same time last year, because it would be important for us to discuss kind of year over year what we did and why. But the year before, in like May, April, and June of 2024, the ad spend was heavily allocated towards, there was the shopping campaign had zero cost, and it was Performance Max of 282,000. So 282,000 out of 317 was Performance Max. And Performance Max, again, had the same issue. Can't scale. Each time I add money, the spend goes up, but sometimes the attribution goes up a little bit in platform, but the top line suffers. And so there were kind of longtime followers and listeners and learners of like what I was teaching, and said, hey, all the stuff that you are seemingly being able to fix are things that we're running into now. And it was to the point where this one campaign was spending like almost half and getting half of the results. And this is kind of what we're looking at back then in terms of the insights. This was a heavy brand campaign. And that kind of is, the name of the game always when you're looking at Performance Max over longer periods of time, when things were set up the way that Google wanted them to be, which was, put your data in, let us optimize for it. And you get like 42,000 clicks on American Tall, 1,700 clicks on American Tall, and then 1,300 clicks on men's or tall men's clothing. So it's like a 44,000 compared to 1,400. Like you can see, I think the conversion value is in the millions, and when some of these for like over a year long time period, but goes from 600 and what is that, 40,000 basically, and the next one down is 13,000. So pretty big gap between those two. And
this is just search too.
And this was every PMax campaign that they're running. It was every campaign. And so what ended up happening is I was saying, hey, if we want to work together, I'm going to have to pause pretty much everything that you have running. These are all brand. No matter which one you look into, I could deep dive here, which is what this is called, deep dive, but you can trust me that each one of these we're doing just brand. So we said, hey, we have to install feeder strategy in order to grow into more non-brand newer customers, because these things are basically just keep getting crazy good conversion rates and ROAS, but a lot of that money you would have made anyway. And it is a lot of your existing customers. So we launched the standard shopping campaigns. And over the time between January to June, we essentially have minimalized our investment into Performance Max and started to maximize our investment into standard shopping. So this one was in pause. Now this one says 120,000 in standard shopping. Now, again, you see 900 versus 200. So it doesn't look that great, which is the reason why people normally don't do this. But if we look at the campaign type of Performance Max, it was essentially kind of, spending heavy here, weaning off, and then we ended up completely kind of killing everything May 13th. So during the time period in April of 2025, you had March 1st and then April 30th compared to the previous year. We're looking at a situation where we had our cost was in the account 1.95% down, but then our conversion value up 31% and our conversions up 46%. So we're saying, yes, like we do have now 5,000 more additional conversions for 1%, 2% less cost. And then we see that we have a conversion value that is increasing at $612,000 for that same exactly reduction of cost of $7,800. So spending $8,000 less and making 612,000 looks pretty good. Now, what's interesting about this though, is there was still a lot of heavy brand, but we were pushing into at the same time reallocating spends in real time into the standard shopping. So if we turn off the comparison, make this a little cleaner. Remember, we had majority of our ad spend. Oh, wait, hold on.
So really quick question on that while you're pulling that up. So cold traffic versus warm traffic is sort of like the general idea behind this. But what was the time period until you saw in-app represent better results globally than like the previous period? Was it like, did it take a year? Did it take just a lag time? What was sort of
it never actually down. We simply started reallocating spend more towards shopping. And you remember when we looked at it before, like 280 out of 320 was Performance Max. Now it's about 50-50. So 160 through 167. So as we started pushing more into Performance Max, we actually saw that the ROAS as we started pushing more money into standard shopping, we saw that the ROAS and Performance Max were reaching, kind of critical levels at like 1,000, where you're spending 167 to make 1.6 million. Now, standard shopping would spend 163 and only make 425 for a 260. So what was interesting about this is what people originally thought, and why feeder strategy is kind of a important implementation, is this was brand getting a decent metric. And then as we added in a campaign that got a way worse metric, the good metric got better because it was branded search. So as we started to push in more cold traffic that were high intent new business or new customers that wanted to convert, it equated to a better result with not having to increase that ad spend, actually decrease that ad spend. So we replaced the traffic with better quality because the returning existing customers were just minting cash, even if you didn't have the campaign on or not. It was useless. It was attributing, was not contributing. So when we said, okay, if we wanted this to actually start to increase feeder strategy, all we did was just reallocate spend to a poorer, quote unquote, performing channel. But because we knew that we're not measuring by in-app ROAS, we knew that our top line would look better. So we had like kind of a 3-part transition. I'll go through the second part. Go ahead.
Important point on this as well, too, because for people that don't have access to back-end numbers inside of, just for the business in general, which highly recommend, like, don't take on a client unless you actually have back-end access. But for those of you that don't, I mean, even in this example itself, since Performance Max scoops up a lot of attribution, you can still see an in-platform metrics look better globally versus what it was at previously.
Right. And what's funny is because feeder strategy offers a contribution and the Performance Max will offer an attribution. What we're looking at here, and this is the time period where we're halfway through, we're 50-50 in spend, 160 and 167. But you can see that this went from nothing to 167, and this one went from 350 down to 167. So it was a 53% reduction and essentially 100% introduction of the channels. So this was the media mix that we actually created, was pull half out of PMax, put half into feeder strategy, standard shopping. But what's interesting is when you look at the conversion rate of Performance Max after you reduce 53% in the cost, you see the conversion rate go up 71%. And we actually went from 11,000 down to 10,000. So we lost 6% of our conversions by pulling 53% of our spend.
That's crazy.
Right. And efficiency. And what's weird is like, well, you reallocated to something that has half the conversion rate and less than half of the conversions at half of the ad spend. Everything on this traditional way to measure this is showing that, yes, this is actually working worse. Like a 6.26 is better than 3.74. Yes. The conversions of 10,000 compared to 3,000, obviously way better when you're looking at equal spends on Performance Max. But the reasons why this Performance Max does not lose conversions, the reason why Performance Max has an increase in conversion rate is because we're actually introducing more new customer acquisition and buyers. They are just starting on standard shopping. So what this means is now we have to actually look at this not as a one versus the other, but a first click, every click after that is how it's how those two work together. So people are like, well, if you pull $189,000 out of an account over March and April compared to the previous year, you should see a reduction. Not necessarily. We do see $252,000 in lost revenue after saving 189. So it's almost like a 1.25 incremental reduction. However, when you look at the search campaigns that are increasing 330% in conversion value and 312% in conversions off of an 85% increase in spend, that was our brand campaign. That is what is now taking the attribution away from Performance Max and giving it into the campaign that it should be in, which is the brand search campaign. Now this is spending 25 grand out of 395 on our brand. And that 25 grand is producing almost a $500,000. The reason why is because now we have a dedicated area that I can consistently pump in a 2K ROAS, and I had to pull it out from a 1K ROAS campaign. So we took our branded traffic out of Performance Max and made it more efficient in a standard search campaign and reallocated all of that expensive revenue, which we used to have to spend a lot of money on in Performance Max to get the same result, and said we could probably do the same result by also cutting everything down in Performance Max by almost 200 Gs. So what we're looking at now is a total top line of a 1.95% change, 1.95% down in cost, and a 5,000 more conversions and $612,000 more conversion value. So now our account metrics have a 33% increase, a 33% increase in ROAS, and has a 27% increase in conversion value and a 42% increase in conversions. Or by time, it even looks even better. So by reallocating, we're starting to see now that this is working better than it was when we're running just Performance Max. So we basically did not reduce any ad spend. We changed the media mix into pushing now half cold, half warm, rather than 80 to 90% warm, or almost 100% warm, basically, if you count the brand name being warm, which I would. So now we pushed the cold traffic and it actually performed better, even reflective of Performance Max metrics that didn't require the spend that it used to in order to achieve the results that it was going to get anyway. Half that ad spend was wasted, essentially. So we fast forward again. May 14th, we shut off Performance Max completely. And that was that line that I showed in the beginning where it's like, this is where we wean down off Performance Max. We shut it off completely on May 14th. So if we look at May 15th to the June 23rd, which is yesterday, compared to the previous period of April and May of 2025, you can see Performance Max is now completely off. We are done with Performance Max. We are just all standard shopping. So what did that do to our year-over-year performance? Again, we have to see if it's working well. It should work well year over year. So if we look at the year over year and we remember that the previous high cost last year was on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 high spending costs. The top 6 had 5 brand campaigns spending 100 grand, 30 grand, 30 grand, 12 grand, 10 grand. And we replaced all of that branded ad cost, which if we look at just increase, there's a deep dive, so we want to count these things up. I'm just going to use round numbers, 93,000 plus 37,000 plus 27,000 plus 12,000 plus 10,000. We had to reallocate 180 grand in branded ad spend. And that 180 grand in branded spend has now been put into $24,000. So now basically minus $24,000, we stopped spending $155,000 in brand spend. We reallocated 155 grand into non-brand. Now let's see what happened year over year. So now we're looking at the total account where we have now our shopping is 100% of our ad spend. Search is the other part of it. We have no demand gen, no PMax. So what are we looking at? Well, there is inside of the account a 0.22% increase in cost compared to the time period where we're running over 150 Gs in brand. So if you think, okay, if you're taking 175,000 in brand, reducing that down to 25, so you're taking $150,000 in branded ad spend, reallocating 150 brand to 150 non-brand, the metrics are probably not going to look that great. Well, yeah. No, it actually did. We went up 13% in conversions, even after saving 150 Gs on branded ad spend. So 150 Gs out of warm into cold, more conversions by 778 for a grand total cost of $468. that $468 increase in ad spend led to a $70,000 of increased revenue, even without spending PMax, even without having the branded ad spend.